The ceremonial hall of Valor Hall fell silent. More than 200 elite operators, generals, admirals, and foreign military observers sat beneath the bright lights of the Atlantic Special Operations Command Center. At center stage stood Admiral Nathan Crowe, one of the most respected special warfare leaders in modern military history. Standing across from him was Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Frost, the only woman in the graduating class, the only operator who remained seated after every other candidate had received a call sign. Crowe smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who finally believed he had won. For 30 days he had pushed her harder than anyone else. He had questioned her qualifications, humiliated her publicly, allowed others to isolate her, and now he was about to finish the job in front of everyone who mattered. "Lieutenant Commander Frost," Crowe said loudly. "Tradition requires every operator to identify their call sign." A murmur moved through the audience. Everyone knew the trap. Evelyn had been excluded from the informal discussions where call signs were normally chosen. She should have had no answer. Crowe took another step forward. "Well, Commander?" The room waited. Some expected embarrassment. Others expected anger. Instead, Evelyn calmly accepted the ceremonial chalice. Her eyes never left the Admiral's face. And then she spoke 2 words. "Crimson Phantom." The world stopped. The color vanished from Nathan Crowe's face. The silver chalice slipped from his fingers. It shattered against the stage floor. Gasps echoed across the hall. Several retired operators stood abruptly. One general nearly dropped the folder in his hands. Crowe staggered backward. His lips trembled. That's impossible. 7 years earlier, a ghost operative, known only as Crimson Phantom, had entered hostile territory alone and rescued 6 captured special operators from certain death. The identity of that operative had never been revealed, until now. And the woman Crowe had spent weeks trying to destroy was standing directly in front of him. But the greatest shock was still to come, because Evelyn Frost had not entered the program to become accepted. She had entered it to finish a mission that had begun 7 years ago, a mission that would expose the man responsible for the betrayal that nearly killed them all. And tonight, the hunt was finally over. 29 days earlier, the morning sun stretched across the training grounds of the Atlantic Special Operations Command Center. 20 operators stood in formation. 19 men. 1 woman. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Frost occupied the final position on the line. Her posture was flawless, her expression unreadable. Not that it mattered. Most of the operators had already decided who she was, or rather, what she represented. An experiment. A political decision. A mistake. Admiral Nathan Crowe walked slowly down the formation. At 63, he still carried himself like a combat operator. His reputation filled rooms before he entered them. When he reached Evelyn, he stopped, a little longer than necessary. His eyes narrowed. "Commander Frost." "Sir." "Your cover appears misaligned." It wasn't. Everyone knew it wasn't, but Evelyn simply nodded. "I'll correct it immediately, sir." Several operators smirked. One of them didn't bother hiding it. Lieutenant Logan Mercer, Golden Boy team leader, decorated, respected, and openly hostile toward Evelyn's presence. Crowe continued down the line. The inspection ended, but the message had already been delivered. "You do not belong here." Commander Marcus Holloway stepped forward. "The next 30 days will determine who earns leadership certification." His gaze moved across the formation. "No excuses. No shortcuts. Dismissed." The operators broke formation. Mercer brushed past Evelyn intentionally. His shoulder struck hers, hard. "Hope you packed extra luck," he said quietly. "You're going to need it." Evelyn said nothing. That seemed to irritate him even more. The dining facility wasn't much better. Every table filled quickly. Every seat found an owner. Except the chair beside Evelyn. No one sat there. No one spoke to her. Some didn't even look at her. She ate alone, again. Across the room, Mercer laughed with the others. The message was clear. The battlefield wasn't the only place where people fought wars. Sometimes they fought them with silence, sometimes with exclusion, sometimes with humiliation. A woman entered the facility then. Dark uniform, sharp eyes. No visible unit markings. Captain Serena Vale. Most people ignored her. Evelyn didn't. For less than a second, their eyes met. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Hours later, Evelyn sat alone in her quarters. She opened a small metal case. Inside rested an old photograph. 6 exhausted operators. A snowy mountain, a mission long buried. Her fingers brushed across the image. 7 years. 7 years chasing one truth. 7 years carrying one promise. A secure tablet suddenly activated. One message appeared. Stand by. Timeline may accelerate. Evelyn stared at the words, then closed the device. Outside, the setting sun painted the horizon red. Inside, her expression never changed. But deep beneath that calm exterior, something had begun moving. The mission was entering its final phase, and somewhere inside this command, someone was already afraid. The next morning arrived cold and gray. A storm front rolled in from the ocean, covering the Atlantic coastline with low clouds and rough seas. For most operators, the weather was an inconvenience. For special warfare candidates, it was simply another obstacle. Commander Marcus Holloway stood before the assembled class. Today's evolution would test maritime infiltration under adverse conditions. Full combat gear, heavy packs, 5-mile offshore insertion, underwater approach, objective recovery. No one complained. No one needed to. This was exactly the kind of punishment they had volunteered for. As the formation broke apart, Logan Mercer glanced toward Evelyn. A smirk crossed his face. Hope you're comfortable swimming with extra weight. The comment was casual, almost playful, but something about his tone lingered. Evelyn didn't respond. She simply headed toward the equipment room. Inside, operators prepared their gear with practiced efficiency. Weapons, breathers, navigation systems, weight distribution. Everything had to be perfect. A mistake in the water could become fatal. Evelyn lifted her tactical vest. Immediately, she felt it. 2 pounds. Maybe slightly more. Added to the left side. Not enough to attract attention. Enough to create imbalance during a long swim. Enough to exhaust a diver over distance. Enough to make failure look natural. She examined the vest carefully. No visible signs. Whoever had done it knew exactly how to hide their work. Across the room, several operators laughed together, Mercer among them. Evelyn quietly removed the additional weight, then redistributed her equipment to compensate. No report. No complaint. No confrontation. Just adaptation. That was what survival required. As she secured the final strap, a familiar voice appeared behind her. Still solving problems nobody else notices. Evelyn turned. Captain Serena Vale stood beside a storage rack. To anyone watching, it looked like a routine interaction, nothing more. Just preparing for the mission, Evelyn replied. Serena nodded slightly. Of course. For a brief moment, their eyes met. A message passed between them. Not through words, through understanding. The mission remained active. Nothing had changed. Or perhaps everything had. An hour later, helicopters thundered across the coastline. The operators sat in silence as the aircraft carried them toward the insertion point. Rain hammered the fuselage. Wind shook the aircraft. Below them, the ocean looked violent, unforgiving. Perfect. Evelyn sat across from Nathan Crowe. The young lieutenant had spent the last several days watching her carefully. He couldn't explain why. Something about her didn't fit. Nothing in her record matched what she did in the field. Nothing. As the helicopter descended toward the drop zone, Ethan noticed something strange. Most operators checked their equipment repeatedly, adjusted straps, verified procedures, managed nerves. Evelyn did none of those things. Instead, she watched the ocean, calculating, measuring, almost as if she already knew exactly what conditions awaited below. The realization unsettled him. The green light flashed. Time to deploy. One by one, operators entered the water. Dark waves swallowed them immediately. Mercer's team entered first. Evelyn's team followed 30 seconds later. The cold hit like a hammer. Visibility dropped almost instantly. Communication became limited to hand signals. The world narrowed to darkness, water, and instinct. Then something happened. Evelyn raised a signal Ethan had never seen before. Not in BUD/S, not in advanced leadership training, not anywhere. The movement was precise, confident, practiced. And somehow every member of her team instinctively followed, as if she wasn't simply leading them, as if she was guiding them through something she had done many times before, far too many times. Hours later, when the exercise ended, one fact would become impossible to ignore. Evelyn Frost had not merely survived the mission. She had outperformed every operator on the course, and for the first time, People were beginning to ask a dangerous question.
Who exactly was she?
Meanwhile, high above the training grounds, hidden inside a secure office, an encrypted notification appeared on a classified terminal, a single line of text. Subject Frost continues to exceed projections.
Phase 2.
Authorized. Someone, somewhere, was watching, and the game was getting bigger. The victory should have ended the questions. Instead, it created more. For 2 days, conversations throughout the Atlantic Special Operations Command Center revolved around one subject: Evelyn Frost. Nobody could explain how her team had completed the maritime exercise nearly 20 minutes faster than the nearest competitor. Officially, the report listed superior navigation and effective teamwork. Unofficially, nobody believed it, especially Logan Mercer. The lieutenant stood inside the training center gym, staring at the digital leaderboard mounted on the wall. His team occupied second place. Evelyn's occupied first. His jaw tightened. "You got lucky once," he muttered. Behind him, several operators exchanged uncertain looks. Even they no longer seemed convinced. Luck didn't explain everything. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, Commander Marcus Holloway announced the next evolution: a competitive offshore extraction mission. 2 teams. 1 objective. First team to secure the package and return successfully would earn priority consideration for future classified assignments. The announcement immediately electrified the room. Competition changed everything, especially among elite operators. Mercer smiled for the first time all day. This was exactly what he wanted: a direct comparison. No excuses. No politics. No special treatment. Just results. Across the room, Evelyn remained completely expressionless, as if the challenge meant nothing. That irritated him even more. Hours later, helicopters carried both teams 15 miles offshore, toward an abandoned platform used for special operations training. Dark clouds covered the horizon. The sea below rolled in heavy swells. Conditions were difficult, not impossible. Perfect for testing operators. Inside the aircraft, Admiral Nathan Crowe monitored the operation through a secure communication link. His voice crackled through their headsets. Mission parameters remain unchanged. Retrieve the package. Fastest successful team wins. A brief pause followed. Then Crowe added something unusual. Leadership reveals itself under pressure. Mercer smiled. The message was obvious. The Admiral expected him to win, expected Evelyn to fail. The helicopters reached the insertion point. Green lights flashed. Teams entered the water. Mercer's group moved aggressively toward the platform. Fast. Direct. Textbook. Evelyn's team followed another route entirely. Within minutes, command personnel monitoring the exercise noticed something strange. The tracking data showed Mercer's team exactly where they should be. Evelyn's team, however, appeared to stop moving. Commander Holloway frowned at the display. "Is their beacon malfunctioning?" A technician checked the system. "No, sir." "They're still transmitting." "Then why aren't they moving?" No one had an answer. Miles away, beneath the surface, Evelyn moved through the dark water with absolute confidence. The ocean around her felt familiar, comfortable, like returning to an old language. She guided her team through a narrow underwater passage hidden beneath the platform structure. No map showed it. No briefing mentioned it, yet she moved as if she had memorized every inch. Ethan Cross watched from behind. His unease continued growing. Where was she learning this? How did she know these routes? How did she always seem one step ahead of everyone else? The answers never came. Only more questions. Minutes later, they reached the objective area. Mercer's team was already there. The package sat secured inside a reinforced compartment. Mercer grinned through his breathing mask. Victory. Finally. Then, everything changed. A sudden shift in underwater current reduced visibility to almost nothing. For 3 chaotic seconds, confusion consumed the compartment. When visibility returned, the package was gone. Mercer's eyes widened. Across the structure, Evelyn's team was already moving toward extraction. Somehow. Impossible. No confrontation. No physical struggle. No violation of rules. Yet she had taken the objective directly from under his nose. Back inside the command center, silence filled the room. Commander Holloway stared at the tactical display. Admiral Crowe's face darkened. How? Nobody answered, because nobody knew. For the second time, Evelyn Frost had defeated operators considered among the best in the country. And this time, She had done it in front of everyone. Far away, inside a classified office hidden beyond the training facility, Serena Vale read an incoming intelligence update. The message contained only 4 words. Ghost network showing movement. For the first time in years, her expression hardened. The people they had been hunting were finally reacting, which meant one thing. The trap was beginning to work. The questions refused to die. 3 days after the offshore extraction exercise, Evelyn Frost had become the center of every private conversation inside the Atlantic Special Operations Command Center. Not because people liked her, not because they trusted her, but because nobody could explain her. Elite operators respected results, and Evelyn's results were becoming impossible to ignore. Lieutenant Nathan Crowe sat alone in the intelligence library late one evening. A secure terminal glowed in front of him. His access level was limited, but curiosity had become stronger than caution. He typed Evelyn Frost's name into the system. The file appeared instantly. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Naval Academy graduate, several conventional assignments, leadership evaluations, performance reviews. Nothing remarkable. Then Ethan noticed something strange. Entire sections were missing, not redacted. Missing. Large gaps existed where deployment history should have been. Training records disappeared for months at a time. Unit assignments ended abruptly, without explanation. Even stranger, several references pointed toward authorization levels above his clearance. He leaned closer. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Nobody accumulated that many missing years by accident. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "Looking for something, Lieutenant?" Ethan nearly jumped. Commander Marcus Holloway stood behind him. The younger officer immediately minimized the screen. "Just studying personnel structures, sir." Holloway stared at him for several seconds. Neither man believed the explanation. Finally, the commander nodded. "Be careful. Curiosity can lead people into places they aren't prepared to enter." Then he walked away. The warning lingered. Across the base, another confrontation was developing. Inside a tactical planning room, operators prepared for the next exercise, a simulated hostile urban environment. Teams would compete to identify threats, gather intelligence, and neutralize targets. Mercer stood before a digital map, confident, aggressive, certain. When Evelyn offered a recommendation regarding approach routes, Mercer laughed, not quietly, not politely, openly. Several heads turned. "With respect, Commander," Mercer said, "I'd rather rely on operators who actually learned these skills through military experience." The room instantly grew uncomfortable. Everyone understood the implication. Evelyn met his gaze. Her expression remained calm. "Experience comes in many forms, Lieutenant." Mercer shook his head. "No, it doesn't. You either earned it in the field, or you didn't." For the briefest moment, something flashed behind Evelyn's eyes. Not anger. Something older, something darker. Gone, almost immediately. Before she could respond, Admiral Nathan Crowe entered the room. The atmosphere changed instantly. Crowe glanced at the tactical display, then at Evelyn. "Any problems here?" "No, sir," Mercer answered. "We were simply discussing operational experience." Crowe's eyes settled on Evelyn. An important topic. His voice carried deliberate meaning. The room fell silent. Again. "You can study tactics forever," Crowe continued. "You can memorize procedures, but some lessons can only be learned through real combat." His gaze never left Evelyn. Several operators shifted uncomfortably. The message wasn't subtle anymore. It was public. Personal. Intentional. Yet Evelyn refused to react. That frustrated Crowe more than open defiance ever could. Later that night, Serena Vale reviewed intelligence updates inside a secure communications room. Multiple encrypted channels showed increased activity. Dormant networks were suddenly communicating again. Ghost network. The same organization connected to the compromise 7 years earlier. The same organization they had spent years hunting. A secure message arrived. Serena opened it. Her expression immediately hardened. Subject Crowe. Initiating unauthorized record inquiries. Additional monitoring recommended. She stared at the message. Nathan Crowe was digging, which meant he felt threatened, which meant he was getting closer to something, or perhaps realizing something was getting closer to him. Across the compound, Evelyn stood alone outside her quarters. The ocean wind moved through the darkness. She removed the old photograph from her pocket. 6 operators. Snow-covered mountains, a mission nobody was supposed to remember. Her fingers brushed across one face. Logan Mercer, 7 years younger, bleeding, broken, dying. She remembered carrying him through freezing terrain while enemy patrols searched for them. She remembered the promise she made, the promise that had defined the last 7 years of her life. Find the truth, no matter how long it takes,
No matter who it hurts.
A vibration interrupted her thoughts. Secure device. Encrypted channel. She opened the message. Only one sentence appeared. Prepare for direct contact. Then the screen went dark. For the first time in years, Evelyn felt something she rarely allowed herself to experience: anticipation. The people hiding behind the betrayal were moving, and soon someone would make a mistake. The next evolution began before sunrise. Cold rain hammered the training compound as operators assembled beside a fleet of transport vehicles. Nobody complained. The miserable conditions only made the challenge more attractive. Commander Marcus Holloway stood beneath a floodlight, water dripping from the brim of his cap. The exercise will simulate the capture of a hostile communications hub. He pointed toward a digital map displayed on a portable screen. The objective contains encrypted intelligence. Retrieve it. Return it. First successful team wins. Simple. Direct. Competitive. Exactly the way elite operators liked it. Logan Mercer stood near the front. His confidence had returned. The last few days had been frustrating, but this mission favored aggressive leadership and decisive action, his specialty. Across the formation, Evelyn Frost remained silent, watching, listening, calculating. Admiral Nathan Crowe stepped forward. This evolution will be different. Immediately, everyone focused on him. The teams will operate independently. No restrictions, no guidance. Leadership alone determines success. Mercer smiled. Crowe was practically handing him the advantage. Within an hour, helicopters carried both teams toward the training zone deep inside Raven Creek infiltration area. Dense forests stretched for miles, steep terrain, limited visibility, perfect terrain for mistakes. Mercer's team moved first. Fast, efficient. Every movement reflected years of special operations doctrine. Observers inside the command center nodded approvingly. Even Crowe appeared satisfied. This is how professionals operate. Nobody disagreed, at least not openly. Then someone noticed Evelyn's team, or rather, failed to notice them. Their tracking beacons showed almost no movement. Minutes became half an hour. Half an hour became 45 minutes. The command center grew increasingly confused. Are they lost? One analyst asked. Crowe folded his arms. It appears reality is finally catching up with Commander Frost. Nobody answered, but several people secretly wondered the same thing. Meanwhile, miles away, Evelyn's team sat motionless, beneath a camouflage net hidden deep within the forest. Ethan Cross checked his watch. Commander, we're falling behind. Several operators exchanged worried looks. Mercer's team was already nearing the objective. They could practically feel defeat approaching. Evelyn never looked concerned. She studied a handheld device, then glanced toward the surrounding terrain. Finally, she stood. Move! The single word changed everything. The team followed. Minutes later, they entered a narrow ravine hidden beneath thick vegetation. No trail. No markers. Nothing visible from aerial surveillance. Ethan stared in disbelief. How did you know this was here? Evelyn didn't answer. She simply kept moving. The ravine led directly beneath the outer sensor network protecting the objective. A route nobody else had discovered. A route nobody else had even considered. Back inside the command center, alarms suddenly exploded across multiple screens. Crowe looked up sharply. What happened? A technician scanned incoming data. The objective has entered high alert. Crowe smiled. Mercer tripped a sensor, but the technician shook his head. No, sir. Communication systems were compromised. From inside the perimeter, the room went silent. Inside. Impossible. Mercer's team hadn't reached the objective yet. So who had? The answer arrived seconds later. Evelyn Frost. Her team appeared inside the objective compound. No breaches. No alarms. No firefight. No obvious entry point. They simply appeared, like ghosts. Mercer's team arrived moments later, only to discover the objective already secured. Shock spread through his operators. Mercer himself stared in disbelief. How? No one answered. Because nobody knew. Again. Back at command, Commander Holloway leaned forward. For the first time, genuine amazement showed on his face. Even Crowe looked unsettled. This wasn't luck anymore. This wasn't coincidence. This was something else. Something none of them understood. The debrief that evening quickly became hostile. Crowe stood at the front of the room. You employed unauthorized methods. Evelyn met his gaze. No, sir. Unconventional methods. Not unauthorized. Crowe's jaw tightened. Your record contains no indication of training that would explain today's performance. For the briefest moment, a faint smile touched Evelyn's lips. My complete record isn't available at this clearance level, sir. The room froze. Several operators exchanged stunned looks. Crowe's face darkened immediately. Nobody spoke to him that way. Nobody. Yet Evelyn remained completely calm, as if she knew something he didn't, as if she had known it all along. That night, deep inside a classified monitoring facility hundreds of miles away, a red warning light activated. An encrypted transmission had just been intercepted. Origin unknown. Destination unknown. Message content. The Phantom is active. Initiate containment. For the first time in 7 years, the enemy had revealed that they were afraid. The atmosphere inside the Atlantic Special Operations Command Center changed after the Raven Creek exercise. Nobody said it openly. Nobody wanted to. But the certainty that had surrounded Evelyn Frost's critics was beginning to crack. Questions were replacing confidence. Doubt was replacing arrogance. And nowhere was that change more obvious than in Logan Mercer. The lieutenant still challenged Evelyn whenever possible, still questioned her methods, still refused to fully trust her. But something had changed. For the first time, he no longer believed she was lucky. Unfortunately for everyone involved, the next test would be far more dangerous than anything they had faced so far. 3 days later, operators assembled inside the Titan CQB Center. The massive training structure simulated a hostile urban environment. Multiple floors, dozens of rooms, electronic security systems, surveillance cameras, smoke generators. Everything designed to create realistic combat conditions. Commander Marcus Holloway reviewed the mission. Hostile personnel occupy the building. Locate intelligence. Secure the objective. Extract. The operators nodded. Routine. Difficult. But routine. Evelyn stood quietly near the rear of the formation. Across the room, Serena Vale observed from a restricted control station. Her expression remained calm, yet something felt wrong. She couldn't explain it, only feel it. The exercise began. Teams entered the structure from multiple access points. The first 15 minutes unfolded normally. Then disaster struck. A warning siren exploded through the facility. Red emergency lights illuminated the corridors. Several operators froze. What the hell is that? The answer came quickly. Too quickly. Fire suppression malfunction! Smoke suddenly poured through multiple sections of the building. Not training smoke. Real smoke. Thick. Black. Dangerous. Inside the control room, technicians erupted into panic. A supervisor grabbed a headset. Emergency evacuation! Everyone out! Now! Alarms continued screaming. More warning indicators flashed across the monitoring screens. Then another problem appeared. A much worse one. One section of the facility had entered full security lockdown. Blast doors sealed automatically. Escape routes disappeared. And 4 operators remained trapped inside, including Logan Mercer. The control room fell silent. For the first time all morning, Admiral Nathan Crowe looked genuinely concerned. Get those doors open! A technician shook his head. We can't. The override system isn't responding. Can we cut power? No, sir. The entire network is locked. Crowe cursed. General staff members exchanged worried looks. Every minute mattered. Inside the structure, conditions were deteriorating rapidly. Mercer's team searched desperately for another exit. They found none. Smoke thickened. Visibility vanished. Breathing became difficult. For the first time during the entire program, real fear entered Mercer's thoughts. This wasn't training anymore. This was survival. Back in the control room, another operator pointed toward a monitor. Sir. Everyone turned. A camera feed showed Evelyn. Instead of moving toward an evacuation route, She was heading deeper into the structure, straight toward the danger. Crowe immediately reacted. What is she doing? She's violating emergency protocol. General Richard Sterling narrowed his eyes. No. She's heading for the control node. The realization hit everyone at once. The only place capable of manually overriding the lockdown system. The most dangerous location in the building. The smoke grew thicker. Several camera feeds failed completely. Then another alarm sounded. A partial ceiling collapse, directly along Evelyn's route. The control room erupted again. She's cut off. Negative. A surviving camera showed Evelyn climbing over the debris, alone. Someone else would have turned back. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She kept moving. Inside the trapped sector, Mercer dropped to one knee, coughing violently. One of his teammates was barely conscious. The situation was becoming critical. Then something happened. The sealed security door suddenly unlocked. Mercer stared in disbelief. The heavy barrier slowly opened. Through the smoke, a single figure appeared. Evelyn Frost. For a moment, nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Mercer simply stared. She had come back for them. Without orders, without support, without hesitation. Move, Evelyn said. Her voice was calm. Steady. Certain. Exactly the voice Mercer remembered hearing years ago. In another place, another nightmare, another impossible rescue. The thought vanished before he could fully grasp it. The operators evacuated immediately. Meanwhile, Evelyn continued toward the control node alone. Several minutes later, the building system suddenly came back online. Smoke extraction activated. Doors unlocked. Emergency systems recovered. The crisis ended. Inside the control room, nobody celebrated. They simply stared at the monitors. Because once again, Evelyn Frost had accomplished something that shouldn't have been possible, and this time, she had saved lives doing it. Hours later, after medical evaluations concluded, Mercer approached her. For the first time, there was no hostility in his eyes, only confusion, only questions. How did you know the override sequence? Evelyn looked at him calmly. Some training isn't listed in official records. Mercer stared at her, a strange feeling tightening inside his chest, a memory. A voice. A promise spoken years ago in freezing darkness. Before he could say anything more, Admiral Crowe appeared. His face was pale, his eyes hard. Commander Frost, my office, now. And for the first time since arriving at the command center, Nathan Crowe looked afraid. Nathan Crowe's office was silent, the kind of silence that felt heavy, dangerous. The walls were lined with photographs from decades of military service, combat deployments, official ceremonies, foreign dignitaries. Every frame told the story of a man who had spent his entire life building a reputation, and now that reputation felt threatened. Crowe stood behind his desk. Evelyn Frost stood across from him. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Crowe broke the silence. Who are you? The question hung in the air. Not who are you officially? Not what rank are you? Something deeper. Something far more personal. Evelyn met his gaze. I am exactly who my records say I am, sir. Crowe's jaw tightened. No. You are not. He moved around the desk, slowly, carefully, like a predator studying prey. I've reviewed every available file, every deployment, every assignment, every evaluation, and none of it explains what happened today. Evelyn remained calm. Then perhaps not every file was available. For the first time, Crowe visibly flinched. A small reaction, almost imperceptible. But it was there, because he understood exactly what she meant. There were records he could not access, records beyond even his authority. That realization bothered him more than he wanted to admit. You bypassed a restricted security system. You knew classified emergency procedures. You continue outperforming operators with far more documented experience. He stepped closer. Why? Evelyn never looked away. Sometimes experience isn't documented. The answer only made things worse. Crowe suddenly felt as though every conversation with her contained hidden meanings, hidden answers, hidden accusations. And he hated it. Hours later, after Evelyn left, Crowe remained alone in the office. His computer screen displayed dozens of personnel requests, additional file inquiries, historical mission reports, archived intelligence assessments. He had spent days digging, days searching, Yet every path ended the same way. Access denied. Restricted authorstruction. Compartmentalized program. The more he investigated Evelyn Frost, the less he understood her. Meanwhile, elsewhere inside the command center, Serena Vale sat inside a secured communications room. Encrypted reports filled her monitor. The situation was escalating rapidly. The fire incident had not been accidental. That much was now certain. Forensic investigators had completed their analysis. Someone deliberately altered the facility systems. Someone with high-level access. Someone familiar with military infrastructure. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. A secure notification appeared. Serena opened it immediately. Access breach confirmed. Source credentials identified. She stared at the report, then slowly leaned back. For 7 years they had chased shadows. For 7 years every lead had vanished. Every trail had gone cold. Until now. Across the compound, Ethan Cross reviewed additional records from the fire incident. Something bothered him. One detail refused to leave his mind. The way Evelyn had known exactly where to go. The way she had moved through smoke and collapsed corridors. The way she had rescued Mercer. It felt familiar. Not to him. To Mercer. Ethan remembered the look on the lieutenant's face after the rescue. Recognition. Not certainty, but recognition. As though an old memory had suddenly awakened. Before he could continue the thought, an emergency notification appeared on his terminal. Training ceremony in 48 hours. All personnel prepare for final evaluations. 48 hours. The end of the program. The final stage. The perfect moment for something significant to happen. As darkness settled across the base, Evelyn stood alone near the shoreline. Waves crashed against the rocks below. Cold wind moved through her hair. A secure device vibrated. One message. Highest priority. She opened it. The screen displayed 4 words. Phantom Directive initiated. Evelyn's expression didn't change, but her pulse did. For 7 years, she had waited for those words. 7 years. Countless deployments. False identities. Dead ends. Sacrifices. Everything had led here. A second message appeared. Packet arriving before ceremony. Final phase. Authorized. She closed her eyes briefly. The hunt was ending. The people responsible were finally moving, which meant they were afraid. Because predators only run when they realize they have become prey. A few hundred yards away, hidden in darkness, another figure watched the shoreline. Unknown. Silent. Observing Evelyn carefully. After several moments, the figure raised a secure phone. One short message was transmitted. She knows. Then the stranger disappeared into the night. Back on the shoreline, Evelyn stared toward the horizon. Something had changed. She could feel it. The enemy was no longer hiding. The enemy was preparing. And in 48 hours, during a ceremony designed to celebrate achievement and tradition, a 7-year secret was finally going to explode into the open, whether anyone was ready or not. Valor Hall had never looked more impressive. American flags stood beside ceremonial banners. Rows of military decorations reflected beneath brilliant lights. Senior officers filled the audience. Generals. Admirals. Foreign military observers. Special operations veterans. Every seat was occupied. Every eye focused on the stage. The graduation ceremony of the elite warfare leadership course had begun. For most operators, it represented the culmination of weeks of brutal training. For Evelyn Frost, it represented something else entirely. The end of a 7-year mission. At center stage stood Admiral Nathan Crowe. His dress uniform carried decades of honors. His expression reflected confidence, control, authority. Everything he believed he still possessed. Behind him sat Commander Marcus Holloway and Captain Serena Vale. Neither revealed what they knew. Neither gave any sign that history was about to change. The ceremony proceeded smoothly. One operator after another stepped forward. Each received a ceremonial chalice. Each received a call sign. Each returned to their seat. Applause followed every announcement. Everything appeared normal. Yet many operators noticed something unusual. The order had changed. Evelyn Frost remained seated. Everyone else had already been called. Logan Mercer watched from the front row. A strange uneasiness settled in his stomach. He couldn't explain why, but he knew Crowe was planning something. Finally, the moment arrived. Nathan Crowe approached the podium. The hall fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, he began. For generations, special operations call signs have represented excellence, commitment, sacrifice. They are not gifts. They are earned. Several people shifted uncomfortably. The meaning behind his words was obvious. Crowe continued. Our standards remain unchanged, regardless of changing policies or social pressures. His eyes found Evelyn. And those standards exist for a reason. The silence deepened. Then he spoke her name. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Frost. She stood. Every movement calm. Controlled. Precise. Just as it had been during every challenge he had placed before her. She walked toward the stage. The audience watched carefully. Many already respected her. Some still doubted her. None knew what was coming. Crowe lifted the ceremonial chalice. Before presenting it, he smiled. A thin smile. The same smile he had worn on the first day of training. Commander Frost, before receiving your call sign, I believe our distinguished guests would appreciate hearing about your most significant operational achievement. Murmurs spread through the hall. The request violated tradition. No other graduate had been challenged this way. No other operator had been asked to justify their presence. Crowe knew exactly what he was doing. He expected hesitation, embarrassment, failure. Instead, Evelyn answered calmly. My operational history contains classified deployments, sir. A few people nodded. A reasonable response. Crowe wasn't finished. Of course. Convenient. Several uncomfortable glances appeared throughout the room. Mercer felt anger rising. Even he recognized the humiliation for what it was. Crowe extended the chalice. Very well. Tradition must continue. His voice echoed through the hall. Lieutenant Commander Frost, what call sign have your peers assigned you? The trap was complete. Everyone knew she had been excluded from those discussions. Everyone knew she should have no answer. Silence filled the room. Evelyn accepted the chalice. Steady hands. Steady breathing. Steady eyes. Then she spoke. 2 words, nothing more. Crimson Phantom. Time stopped. The color drained from Nathan Crowe's face. The silver chalice slipped from his fingers. It struck the stage, shattered. The sound echoed across the hall like a gunshot. Gasps erupted. Several retired operators stood instantly. One general whispered a curse beneath his breath. Logan Mercer froze. The name hit him like lightning. Not because he understood everything, because somewhere deep inside his memory, he remembered it. Crowe staggered backward. His hands trembled. No. The word barely escaped his lips. That's impossible. Evelyn took one step forward. For the first time since arriving at the command center, something changed in her expression. Not anger. Not pride. Truth. 7 years of truth. 7 years ago, she said quietly. 6 special operations personnel were captured during Operation Silent Raven. The hall became completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because everyone suddenly realized they were no longer witnessing a graduation ceremony. They were witnessing the beginning of a revelation. And Nathan Crowe looked as though he had just seen a ghost. The silence inside Valor Hall felt endless. More than 200 people sat frozen in their seats. No one spoke. No one moved. Every eye remained fixed on Evelyn Frost and on Admiral Nathan Crowe, because for the first time all evening, the legendary Admiral looked vulnerable, afraid. Evelyn stood calmly beneath the stage lights. Her voice carried through the hall. 7 years of secrets hidden beneath every word. Operation Silent Raven was compromised before deployment. A massive screen behind the stage suddenly activated. Gasps spread through the audience. Classified mission images appeared. Snow-covered mountains. Satellite photographs. Recovered intelligence reports. The evidence was overwhelming. Nathan Crowe stared at the screen, his face growing paler by the second. Evelyn continued. 6 operators entered hostile territory. They never reached their objective. Their location was exposed before insertion. A photograph appeared. 6 exhausted soldiers. Wounded. Captured. Mercer's breathing stopped. He recognized the image instantly because he was in it. 7 years younger. Broken. Bleeding. Nearly dead. The memory slammed into him. Cold mountains. Enemy search teams. Hopelessness. And one voice, a calm voice, a woman's voice, promising they would make it home. The realization struck him like lightning. His eyes widened. No. He slowly stood. The room turned toward him. Mercer stared at Evelyn. Emotion filled his face. "You carried me." The words came out as barely more than a whisper. "You carried me down that mountain." The room fell even quieter, if that was possible. Evelyn met his gaze. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Mercer already knew. For 7 years, he had believed a mysterious local asset rescued them. For 7 years, he had never learned the truth. Now the truth stood before him. The woman he had mocked. The woman he had excluded. The woman he had tried to humiliate. She had saved his life. A sharp breath escaped him. Then something extraordinary happened. Logan Mercer stepped forward and slowly rendered a salute. Not because of rank. Not because of protocol. Because of respect. Because of gratitude. Because he finally understood. Others began standing. 1. Then 2. Then 10. Then dozens. The room transformed. Operators rose to their feet. Veterans. Officers. Commanders. All saluting Evelyn Frost. Nathan Crowe stared in disbelief. The ceremony he had planned was collapsing around him, and Evelyn wasn't finished. A new image appeared on the screen. Security records. Authentication logs. Encrypted communications, evidence collected over 7 years. Captain Serena Vale finally stood. Her voice cut through the hall. "My name is not Captain Serena Vale." Several officers looked surprised. She removed the insignia from her uniform. Beneath it were Admiral stars. Rear Admiral Serena Vale. The room erupted with whispers. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Frost's placement in this program was authorized under a compartmentalized counterintelligence operation. Every word landed like a hammer. For 7 years, we investigated the compromise of Operation Silent Raven. Crowe shook his head. "No. This is insanity. This is a graduation ceremony." Serena ignored him. The compromise originated from credentials assigned to Admiral Nathan Crowe. The hall exploded into stunned reactions. Crowe stepped backward. His face twisted with disbelief. "I didn't betray anyone. No one is claiming deliberate betrayal," Serena answered. "But your credentials were used." Crowe stared at her, speechless. The evidence continued appearing on the screen. Dates. Times. Access logs. Witness statements. Every piece fitting together. Every piece impossible to ignore. Evelyn stepped forward again. 7 years ago, I made a promise." The room immediately fell silent. She reached into her dress uniform, slowly removed a small crimson pin, shaped like a phantom bird. The symbol of Crimson Phantom. "I promised 6 dying operators that I would find out why they were abandoned." Her voice never trembled, not once. "I promised I would uncover the truth." She attached the pin to her collar, visible for the first time. And tonight, she looked directly at Crowe. "The mission is complete." Nathan Crowe lowered his head. For the first time in decades, the legendary admiral had no defense, no authority, no control. Only regret, only shame, only the realization that the woman he spent 30 days trying to break had spent 7 years protecting the men he failed. And throughout Valor Hall, every person present understood they were witnessing history. Not the end of a training course, the end of a lie, and the beginning of a legacy. The ceremony ended, but nobody left. Not immediately. Because everyone inside Valor Hall understood they had witnessed something far greater than a graduation. They had witnessed the truth, and the truth had changed everything. Nathan Crowe remained seated on the stage long after the applause faded. His shoulders looked smaller somehow. The authority that had defined him for decades seemed to have vanished. Security personnel approached quietly, respectfully. No handcuffs. No public confrontation, just a simple request to accompany them. Crowe nodded once. He didn't argue, didn't protest, didn't look at anyone. As he passed through the hall, operators moved aside silently. The legendary admiral who once commanded every room now walked alone, and for the first time in his career, he looked like a man carrying the full weight of his mistakes. Evelyn watched him go. There was no triumph in her eyes, no satisfaction, only closure. Because this had never been about revenge. It had always been about the truth. Hours later, the crowd had thinned. Only a handful of operators remained inside the nearly empty hall. Logan Mercer approached slowly. Gone was the arrogance. Gone was the hostility. What remained was humility and regret. "Evelyn," It was the first time he had ever used her first name. She turned toward him. Mercer took a deep breath. "I owe you more apologies than I can count." She said nothing, allowing him to continue. "For 30 days I judged you. I doubted you. I mocked you." His voice became rough. "And 7 years ago, you carried me through a mountain pass with a shattered leg, while enemy patrols hunted us." Emotion tightened his throat. "I don't know how to live with that." A faint smile touched Evelyn's face. The first genuine smile anyone had seen from her. "You don't," Mercer frowned. She continued, "You honor it." The words struck him harder than any accusation ever could. Mercer nodded slowly, understanding, for the first time. Nearby, Ethan Cross approached, carrying a folder. His curiosity remained unchanged, but now it was mixed with admiration. "I finally understand why none of your records made sense." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Only now?" Ethan laughed softly. "Honestly, I started suspecting around the underwater exercise." Several nearby operators laughed. The tension eased. For the first time since arriving at the command center, Evelyn felt something unusual. Peace. The mission was over. 7 years of secrecy, 7 years of lies, 7 years of waiting. Finished. The next morning brought official confirmation. Nathan Crowe submitted retirement papers, pending further review. The public explanation cited health concerns. Those who mattered knew the truth. By afternoon, another announcement followed. Rear Admiral Serena Vale stood before a small gathering of senior officers. Evelyn Frost. Evelyn stepped forward. Serena opened a presentation case. Inside rested a silver insignia. Unlike any standard qualification badge, a crimson phantom bird was engraved into the metal, the symbol of her call sign, the symbol of everything she had endured. "By authority of Strategic Intelligence Directorate and Task Force Sentinel," Serena smiled, "you are hereby assigned as Senior Operations Advisor and Lead Instructor." Applause filled the room. Evelyn accepted the insignia, not for herself, for the mission, for the 6 men she promised to protect, for everyone who would come after. 1 month later, the new training cycle began. 20 operators stood in formation. Among them were 2 female lieutenants. Young, focused, determined. Years earlier, they might never have received the opportunity. Now they stood exactly where they belonged. At the front of the formation stood Evelyn Frost. Commander Marcus Holloway remained beside her. Logan Mercer now served as assistant instructor. Even Ethan Cross had joined the instructional staff. The command had changed. The culture had changed. The future had changed. Evelyn looked across the formation. The same training grounds, the same expectations, the same impossible standards. But one thing was different. Nobody stood alone. Nobody was automatically dismissed. Nobody was judged before being tested. The lesson had finally been learned. "Welcome to the Elite Warfare Leadership Course," Evelyn began. Her voice carried across the field. "You will be evaluated by your performance, not your background, not assumptions, not expectations. Performance." The operators listened carefully. Every word earned. Every word lived. After the briefing ended, Ethan Cross caught up with her near the shoreline. There was one question he had never stopped wondering about. "Commander." Evelyn looked at him. "Yes, Lieutenant?" Ethan hesitated. 7 years ago, when you crossed those mountains to rescue 6 trapped operators, how did you know you could succeed? The ocean wind moved quietly around them. For a moment, Evelyn stared toward the horizon, toward memories, toward sacrifices, toward a promise, finally fulfilled. Then she answered, "I didn't." Ethan blinked. "You didn't?" She shook her head. "No. I didn't know it could be done." A small smile appeared. "I only knew it had to be done." Silence followed. Powerful silence. The kind that carried truth. Ethan nodded slowly, because suddenly, everything about Evelyn Frost made sense. Not her skills, not her records, not her legend, her purpose. That was what made her extraordinary. As the morning sun rose above the Atlantic coast, Evelyn watched the newest generation begin their journey. The crimson phantom insignia glinted in the light, no longer hidden, no longer classified, no longer a secret. A reminder that true greatness rarely announces itself. Sometimes it arrives quietly, sometimes it stands alone, and sometimes the person everyone underestimates turns out to be the one who changes everything.